Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Irfan Hussain, and I'm here with another video regarding our program of TEFL and TESOL. And this video is part of the series of 3 videos of second language acquisition theories, and this is the second part. Today we will discuss Chomsky's mentalism, and sometimes it is also called innatism. It has some other names as well, with a little variation like cognitivism as well. Noam Chomsky, he was born in 1928 and he is a living legend. He is an American linguist, an expert of international relations, a mathematician, and philosopher, and also known to be the father of modern linguistics. Regarding language acquisition, Chomsky always stressed that all learning involves inherent properties of child's mind. Every theory of learning that is even worth considering incorporates an innateness hypothesis. What is of the view? That every child, every person has an inbuilt mechanism of language learning. Contradictory to behaviorism, it is not only an external process, but the behaviorists say that language acquisition is because of the external elements and parameters. Chomsky says that it is not external, but it is somewhat internal, somewhat does exist inside the mind that helps to learn a required language. Regarding his theory, we will discuss 2 basic parameters of his concepts. The first one is universal grammar, and second one is cognitivity. Both these aspects need a little detail. That is why this video is comparatively a long video, but I didn't find it suitable to break this video in parts. For better understanding, we need to go in the same strain. What he says: an adult native speaker of a language knows things he could not have learned from the samples of speech he has heard. First, try to understand it. That a native speaker of a language doesn't use a language only that he has heard before. He can produce new language as well. When we say new language, it means that he can speak new words, new constructions as well. It is a research that whenever one speaks, one uses 70 to 80% new language, a language that he has never spoken before. What he claims, that an adult native speaker can produce language, he can speak the words or sentences and express his ideas in a way that he has never heard before. It means that he hasn't received this language from external source. This is where Chomsky claims, since this knowledge is not based on his experience of the world, because it has not come from outside, it must come some property inside his own mind. So because it hasn't come out from outside, definitely it must have some source, and this source is inside the mind. This is what is innatism, what is mentalism, according to Chomsky, that language is produced not only because of the external parameters, but there is some internal source inside the mind as well. The language properties inherent in the human mind make up universal grammar. What we discussed in the previous slide, that there is something inside the mind that helps to create language, and this mechanism, these properties that are actually inherent in the human mind make up universal grammar. Why it is called universal grammar? Because Chomsky claims that this grammar that does exist in our mind is universal, and it is open for all the languages of the world. It is not particular for any particular specific language, but it is open for all. That is why he says it universal grammar. That universal grammar which consists not of particular rules of a particular grammar. It is not that if I am an Urdu speaker or Punjabi speaker and there are rules of only Urdu and Punjabi that two exist in my mind, but these rules are regardless of any language. They are not specific for any language. What he says, which consists not particular rules of a particular grammar, but of a set of general principles that apply to all grammars, and that leaves certain parameters open. So a few parts of that grammar is specific in the way that it will be molded according to the use of the language. We will explain it in the later slides. One part is general, that it is applied for every language, but there are few parameters that are prone to be changed and molded according to the language in use in environment. We will discuss it and we'll try to understand it. So to acquire language, the child needs not only universal grammar but also evidence about a particular language. He needs to hear sentences of English or Urdu or any language that he is acquiring to know how to fix the parameters of the order of verb, subject and object. This is one example, verb, subject and object. Now try to understand what are the fixed parameters that are general principles for all language and what is left open. We know that there is subject and there is verb and there is object. That is the general principle for every language. What happens and what is the evidence, the word evidence, that a child or a language learner receives evidence from environment? If he is acquiring Urdu language, he knows that this subject, verb and object has order of subject, object and verb. Try to understand it. He already knows that there is subject, verb and object, something that like subject, verb and object. But if he gets evidence from Urdu environment, he places these in the order of subject, object and verb. But if he gets evidence from English environment, he places it in subject, verb and object. So the general rule was that there is some subject, there is some verb, there is some object that make a sentence. But the evidence, what is specific and particular to the language, this is evidence from the environment, and every language gives its own evidence and makes the general principles to settle along with the flexible principle to make a complete set of grammar. The evidence he encounters can be positive or negative. So when a child is exposed to or a language learner is exposed to the environment, he already have general principles of grammar in his mind, and now he needs further evidences to modify this grammar. He may come across two kinds of evidences, positive or negative. Positive evidence consists of actual sentences of a language. By hearing "the cow jumped over the moon" or "Johnny loves cabbage," the child learns that English has that syntax of subject, verb and object. Both examples have been taken from Chomsky. And if he comes to know that वो खाना खाता है, this is an Urdu sentence. वो किताब पढ़ता है, this is an Urdu sentence. And what happens, he comes to know that because this is a positive evidence, that he listens, hears direct sentences, and he acquires that there is the order of subject, object and verb in Urdu. And if he listens, hears the direct positive evidence of English, he comes to know that it is subject, verb and object. This is a bit technical, that is why I am taking time to make it clear. So this is the positive evidence, the sentences that a learner listens directly from environment. Negative evidence falls in two categories. One is direct and other is indirect category. Now let us understand what is the direct and indirect category. Indirect negative evidence consists of correction of the child's mistakes by adults. Child speaks wrong sentence, incorrect sentence, and an adult or teacher or parent corrects the child. For example, it is again from Chomsky, you mustn't say "you was, Jimmy," you must say "you were." So it is a correction. This is a negative evidence. How it is negative? Because child produced a sentence and he has been negated, that he produced a wrong, incorrect order, and then he is corrected. That is a direct negative evidence. What is indirect negative evidence? It is provided by the non-occurrence of something. What happens that because it does not exist in language and child never hears it, never listens it, a learner never listens to it. So because of the absence of that structure, there is a complete proof of the evidence, the complete evidence that this structure does not exist in that particular language. So what is indirect negative evidence? It is provided by the non-occurrence of something in the language the child hears. The fact he never hears subject, object, verb order in English language. He never hears that there is subject, object and verb. And it is a negative evidence that English is a subject, verb, object language, because it is never subject, object, verb in English. He never hears that it is in English. So he is now sure that there is only one syntax, that is subject, verb and object. So non-existence, non-occurrence of that incorrect order is also a kind of negative evidence. First language acquisition relies chiefly on positive evidences. The child apparently receives little direct negative evidence in the form of correction of syntax. We know that child acquires from the environment, and he already have a built-in grammar in his mind, and he receives positive evidences from his environment, and he grows with the language. Chomsky's theory assigns a precise role to the environment. He doesn't give a big credit to environment. He gives a precise role to environment. Negatively, it denies that it provides sufficient evidences for the learning of particular aspects of linguistic knowledge without the aid of powerful inbuilt grammar. He is of the view that alone environment is not sufficient to give sufficient knowledge of the language. So there must be an inbuilt structure inside the mind that is collaborated with external parameters, and it makes a complete set of grammar. Positively, it suggests the environment provides positive evidences to help the learner fix the ways in which universal grammar applies to the language he is learning. So the same aspect has been seen in the negative way, that environment is not sufficient, and in the positive way, that environment helps the inbuilt structure to complete the set of rules of grammars. Universal grammar makes certain things obligatory in any grammar. It leaves free to vary within preset limits. The environment provides evidence about the particular limits that apply in a given case. This is the conclusion. The universal grammar makes certain things obligatory, few things that are must. For example, when we study universal grammar of Chomsky, he gives many rules that are similar to all the grammars of the language. For example, every language has phrases, and every phrase has a phrase head, and this phrase head is supported with other elements. For example, I say that he runs fast. He runs fast. There is an adverb, fast, that comes after run. So this does exist in English, and it does exist in Urdu as well. वो तेज भागता है. What happens here? The adverb तेज comes before the verb. So all these things do exist, and their existence is universal. What is not universal and what is specific is their order. So in Urdu, order is different, and in English this order is different. It must be different, and may have a lot of variety in other languages as well. So this is the concept of universal grammar. Quickly concluding it, that there are few things that are obligatory, that are fixed, and that do exist in our mind, and there are other things that we need to acquire from the environment, and the collaboration of these internal and external parameters make a complete set of the grammar. That is universal grammar, and that does exist in every language learner. What is its role in second language acquisition? So we will see it in detail after cognitivity. Much grammatical knowledge simply needs fixing through evidence from the environment. We have discussed it already. What does need learning is how particular lexical items can enter into various structures. A large part of language learning is matter of determining from presented data the elements of the lexicon and their properties. We have discussed actually in all this in our previous slides. Next is cognitivity. Cognitivity is development. It is brain development. It is the addition of knowledge into the existing body of knowledge. So when existing knowledge is added with more knowledge and then added with more knowledge, it leads towards development. This development is of two types. One, development of overall levels of thinking. Second, the system of information processing involved in handling language, which can be called channel capacity. So on one side, this is a complete overall development of the thinking of some person, and on other side, this is particular with language, and that is known as channel capacity. That is a technical term, channel capacity. That is the development of system of information processing involved in handling language. So two types, please consider it. One is development, overall development, and another is language development, that is known as channel capacity. So far as acquisition is concerned, the mental faculty of language does not need to be related to other faculties of the mind. For instance, Piagetians would claim that language presupposes certain cognitive operations. So here we need to understand that mental development and acquisition of language, these are two different and separate phenomena. What Chomsky says, that mental faculty, development of the mental faculty is not very much connected with acquisition of language. We will see how it happens, but these are two different phenomena. Cognitivism, so far as development is concerned, language is bound up with other elements of cognitive maturation. If we talk about development, then it is definitely associated with other elements of cognitive maturation. But if it is about acquisition, it is not developed. For example, a child doesn't speak. He is on the age of 6 months to 7 months or a year, cannot speak because he has not got maturity of his brain maturity, of his physical maturity that can help him to produce words. But he has acquired language to a great extent. You ask the child to do something, child does it. You call the child with his name, child does it. And you give child some instructions, child do obey. So it means that child has been acquiring the language, although he has not developed himself to produce language in the way. Acquisition and development are different. Although language is an independent mental organ, there is a big claim by Chomsky that language is an independent mental organ. In development, it nevertheless needs to draw on other mental organs. Indeed, the same argument applies to physical organs. This is what I just discussed. That language is somewhat different. Child is acquiring the language, but because his other mental faculties and because his physical organs do not support him, so he is not on the stage to speak the language, but he is acquiring. This is an example of two different cells that are to be matured for the language acquisition, development. Phonological development may be affected by the myelinization of the nervous system, which gradually allows more complex signals to be transmitted. The growth of gyrase guanyl cells in the hippocampal area of the brain may allow the child to attain a particular cognitive level at the age of about 5. We will discuss these cognitive levels in our questions model, and after understanding the questions monitor model, if you come back to this slide, that will be easier for you to understand it. So presently just understand that these are two types of cells. One is associated with phonological development and other is associated with cognitive development. Neither of these physical changes affect acquisition itself. We have already made ourselves clear that acquisition is somewhat different, but many have profound effects on language development. The certain aspects of cognitive and physical development can influence the order in which a child develops language. Child is acquiring language, and development is associated with other mental faculties and physical development of different organs. Now we have discussed all this language acquisition, and our primary topic is about second language acquisition, because we need a point of comparison. That is why we discussed all this process, how language is acquired. The most obvious difference property is that the language 2 learner possesses a grammar of a first language, incorporating the principles of universal grammar and specifying a particular set of values for its parameters. That is a big difference. When a child learns first language, he does not possess a complete set of grammar. he has only the part of grammar that is general, that is fixed, that are the fixed principles of universal grammar. But when an adult learns some new language, acquires some new language, he already has a complete set of grammar in his mind that is of his first language. The situation is different. This situation may be helpful for the learner in many ways, and it also may be a problem in many ways. How it is problem? Because it is subject, object, verb in Urdu, so a learner may repeat it again and again and set the English sentences in the same order. Because there is no use of article in Urdu language, so in English language he may miss articles, use of article, because there are only 2 articles in Urdu language and French has many more, so our English learner may miss many articles, use of article in while speaking or using French language. So first language always interferes. The advantage is that because he already has acquired a structure, so he can mold that structure in a way. He knows that it is in Urdu, it is subject, object and verb. He can just mold it a bit and can say it is subject, verb and object, and with that little change he can acquire a structure of a new language. So it can both be beneficial and it can both be in another way it can be a problem, that is called a mother tongue influence. In a way, this rephrases the debate about the relationship of first and second language learning, whether L2 learners start from scratch or depend upon their first language. So should he start from the scratch, from zero, when learning a second language, or should he depend upon his first language? And we have discussed it, that it can be in both ways. It can give benefit and also it can give problem, disadvantage. The role of cognition is also different in L2 acquisition, since the learner is not necessarily subject to the same maturational constraints. See, when a child is acquiring the first language, he is in the process of development of cognitivity. But when an adult learns or acquires some new language, he already has developed that cognitivity. So he is mature here. He has already achieved all the maturation of his cognitivity and of his mental faculties. Let us first consider this in terms of cognitive levels. The study of language, second language learning in adults, in a sense, to study language acquisition divorced from maturation. This is what I just said, that in first language acquisition, cognitivity and maturation, all things go along with one another. But it differs from L1 development, wherever, because here in L2 acquisition, this maturation, this cognitivity has already been achieved. Now there is only one more element that is needed for a new language, that is only acquisition. Maturation and cognitivity has already been achieved. It differs from L1 development, wherever the L1 has, so to speak, been held up for lack of cognitive maturity or channel capacity. So this is a big advantage for the L2 learners on adult level, because many times a child stucks himself because of his cognitive immaturity and because of his weakness of channel capacity. But an adult has got that cognitive maturity and he has that wider channel capacity, so he is on advantage to acquire or learn a new language. The channel capacity for language use depends upon maturation and does not need to be acquired in a second language. It is already mature, so a second language does not need that maturation again. However, some aspects of channel capacity are not transferred. That is also another important point. Every aspect is not transferred to a second language. They are in some way dependent on the first language. So see what it is. Some language related aspects of memory, such as rehearsal strategies and short-term memory capacity, are substantially transferred to second language. See, language related aspects. Which one? Memory, such as rehearsal strategies or short-term memory. They are transferred, these faculties, these abilities are transferred to a second language acquisition process. But others, such as a clustering of vocabulary, these are not transferred to the second language, because a new language has its own set of vocabulary and so on. So this is the difference between first language acquisition and second language acquisition. Our topic is second language acquisition theories, and to understand how second language is acquired, we need a point of comparison. That is why we discussed first language acquisition, and then we differentiated, distinguished the process, how second language acquisition is different from first language acquisition. And this is a very wide subject, and I try to precisely tell you the limited parameters that are very necessary to discuss in this course, and another time it may be elaborated in detail and you may study on advanced levels. So if you have any question, you may ask me. I try to simplify the things, and I will try to share the script with you as well. And if there is any problem, because it is highly technical, so if you feel uncomfortable at some point and if you are not able to understand anything, if I could not be able to make it clear for you, you can ask me, you can question me. Till then, thank you very much, and thanks to all who stayed with me for this long video. It was necessary actually to complete it in one go. See you inshallah. God bless you.